The oil that refuses to run out. Why the world's petroleum deadline keeps moving. For generations, people have been told that the world is running out of oil. The date changes, but the warning sounds strangely familiar. In the 1950s, people were warned that petroleum might last only a few more decades. In the 1980s, another generation heard much the same thing. Later came predictions pointing toward the early 21st century. Then in 2019, the Millennium Alliance for Humanity and the Biosphere MAHB at Stanford University published an article citing calculations that gave another striking date, 2052. At the rate considered in that calculation, the world's known oil reserves would be exhausted around that year. It is an alarming number. But should we circle 2052 on the calendar? Probably not. Petroleum really is a finite, non-renewable resource. It takes millions of years to form from buried organic material, especially ancient plankton and algae. We are consuming it enormously faster than nature can replace it. Yet the date when the world will run out of oil has proved surprisingly difficult to predict. The reason is that an oil reserve is not simply a giant underground tank waiting to be emptied. It is partly geology, but it is also technology, economics, discovery, politics, and human ingenuity. And that makes the story much more interesting. The number that keeps running away. Imagine that you have $5,000 in the bank and spend $100 every month. At that rate, you have 50 months of money left. Simple. But suppose next year you discover another savings account. Then your salary rises. Later, something that used to cost $100 costs only $60. Meanwhile, you change your habits and begin spending less. Suddenly, that original 50-month deadline means very little. Something similar happens with petroleum. Historical petroleum statistics reveal a curious pattern. Although the world has consumed enormous quantities of oil, estimates of how many years of proved reserves remain have often stayed surprisingly stable. The petroleum industry even has an informal expression for this strange effect, the oil constant. For much of modern exploration history, the expected remaining supply has repeatedly hovered around a few decades, rather than steadily counting down towards zero. How can that happen? Because when petroleum experts speak of proved reserves, they do not mean every drop of oil physically existing beneath Earth. They mean oil that is known with reasonable certainty and can be recovered under existing economic and operating conditions. That is crucial. In other words, reserves are not fixed forever. Change the technology, price, knowledge, or economics, and you can change the reserves. And this is why 2052 is better understood. As one of many estimates generated from reserve to production calculations, not as a universally accepted forecast of the day the world's oil will disappear. Different assumptions about reserves, production, discoveries, technology, prices, and future demand can produce very different dates. The oil didn't grow, our ability to reach it did. There is no underground oil ferry secretly refilling the wells. What changes is the boundary between oil that exists and oil that humans can realistically produce. A deposit may be known but too difficult or expensive to recover. Years later, a higher oil price, better geological knowledge, improved drilling, or cheaper technology may make that same petroleum commercially recoverable. Consider an oil field buried beneath deep ocean water. A century ago, that petroleum might as well have been on the moon. Geologists might not have known it existed, and even if they did, no company could have reached it economically. Then drilling technology improved. The impossible became difficult. The difficult became expensive. And sometimes the expensive became profitable. Oil that had existed for millions of years suddenly entered the world's recoverable reserves. The petroleum did not appear overnight. Human capability changed. The man who predicted the peak. No story about running out of oil is complete without M. King Hubbert. In 1956, Hubbert, an American geophysicist, argued that oil production in a region should rise, reach a peak, and then decline. His model became famous as the Hubbert curve, and the idea became known as peak oil. Hubbert predicted that conventional U.S. oil production would peak sometime between 1965 and 1970. Then something extraordinary happened. It did. U.S. production reached a major peak around 1970, making Hubbert's prediction remarkably successful. Soon people began applying the same logic to the entire planet. If individual oil fields peak and countries peak, surely the world must eventually peak too. And that basic principle has not disappeared. Shale oil did not disprove depletion, nor did it prove that petroleum is unlimited. Individual oil fields still mature and decline. What shale changed was the amount and type of petroleum that could be economically produced. The real question, therefore, became whether new discoveries, new fields, and new technologies could offset the decline of older fields. For a time, many observers believed U.S. production had entered an irreversible decline. Then came a technological surprise. The shale revolution, oil hidden in plain sight. For years, enormous quantities of hydrocarbons were known to exist inside tight rock formations in the United States. There was just one problem. Getting them out economically was extremely difficult. Then engineers combined two technologies: horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, commonly called fracking. Instead of simply drilling straight downward, operators could drill down and then sideways through an oil-bearing layer. Hydraulic fracturing opened tiny pathways in the rock, allowing trapped hydrocarbons to flow toward the well. Petroleum that had previously been considered uneconomic suddenly became producible. The effect was dramatic. The shale boom eventually lifted U.S. oil supply by millions of barrels per day. The IEA reports that from 2015 to 2024 alone, the United States accounted for about 90% of the increase in global oil supply. Hubbert had not been foolish, and peak oil had not somehow been abolished. Instead, shale postponed and reshaped earlier peak oil forecasts by opening resources that previous generations could not economically produce. Brazil, oil beneath the salt. Another remarkable chapter unfolded far from Texas beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Off Brazil, explorers found enormous petroleum resources beneath deep water, rock, and thick layers of salt. Producing them required drilling at depths that earlier generations could scarcely have imagined. Fields such as Brazil's giant pre-salt discoveries showed once again that petroleum resources could move from the category of unreachable to recoverable as exploration and engineering improved. The petroleum industry today can investigate deep offshore and subsalt reservoirs that were largely beyond its capabilities in the 20th century. Think about that for a moment. The oil had been there all along. But until humans developed the knowledge, machinery, seismic imaging, and engineering needed to find and reach it, it contributed little to the world's usable supply. Once again, geology had not changed. Our ability to work with geology had...
Then Guyana changed the map again. In 2015, another surprise appeared beneath the Atlantic. A major offshore discovery at the Liza field transformed tiny Guyana into one of the world's remarkable new petroleum producers. For most of modern petroleum history, Guyana barely appeared on the global oil map. Then suddenly it did, and Guyana is not alone. New discoveries continue to be made, while improved knowledge of existing fields can also increase estimates of recoverable petroleum. Stories like these explain why a countdown calculated today cannot tell us precisely what the world's oil reserves will look like 30 years from now. We do not yet know everything we will discover, nor do we know what future technology will make recoverable. So is petroleum actually infinite? Here we need to be careful. No, petroleum is not an infinite resource on a human timescale. It forms through geological processes operating over immense periods of time. Petroleum is a fossil fuel formed over millions of years from ancient organic material, particularly plankton and algae. Human civilization consumes it incomparably faster than Earth creates commercially useful deposits. That makes petroleum effectively non-renewable for us. There is also little scientific support for the popular claim that vast commercial quantities of petroleum are continuously being produced deep inside Earth through non-biological processes. Abiogenic hydrocarbons can exist, but geological and geochemical evidence strongly supports the biological origin of the petroleum resources on which our civilization depends. So oil never runs out is the wrong conclusion. A better statement is, we do not know exactly when economically recoverable oil will become scarce, because the amount we call recoverable oil keeps changing. What about the famous 2052 deadline? This brings us back to that frightening date. In its 2019 article When Fossil Fuels Run Out, What Then? MAHB cited calculations that projected oil ending around 2052, natural gas around 2060, and coal around 2090. But the number needs context. 2052 is not an official expiration date for petroleum, nor is it a universally accepted scientific forecast. It is one estimate based on assumptions about known reserves and rates of consumption. Change those assumptions, and the date changes. New fields are discovered. Existing fields are better understood. Recovery methods improve. Oil prices rise or fall. Governments open or close regions to drilling. Environmental regulations change. Consumption rises in some parts of the world and falls in others. That is why a reserve to production calculation is better understood as a snapshot than a countdown clock. It tells us, roughly, if we have this amount of proved reserves, and continue producing at something like this rate, how many years would those reserves represent? It does not tell us the year in which humanity will pump Earth's final barrel. And there is another reason. That final date may never arrive in the way people imagine. We may begin leaving large amounts of oil underground before we physically run out of it. The final twist: demand may peak before supply disappears. For most of the 20th century, the great fear was peak oil supply. What happens when Earth can no longer provide enough petroleum? The 21st century is increasingly asking a different question. What happens if the world no longer wants as much of it? Electric vehicles, renewable electricity, improved efficiency, climate policy, and changing transportation systems are already affecting petroleum demand. The International Energy Agency's Oil 2025 report projects global oil demand rising to around 105.5 million barrels per day, and reaching a plateau near the end of this decade under its assumptions. It also estimates that electric vehicles could displace more than 5 million barrels per day of oil demand by 2030. But demand forecasts deserve the same caution as supply forecasts. Future oil use will depend on how quickly electric vehicles spread, what governments do, how fast developing economies grow, how much people travel by air, and how strongly demand for plastics and other petrochemicals increases. The IEA itself describes the uncertainties surrounding its forecasts as substantial. Emerging and developing economies are still expected to increase oil consumption, while petrochemicals and aviation remain important sources of future demand. Indeed, different assumptions can produce very different futures. In one IEA scenario, oil demand levels off around 2030 and then slowly declines. Under a current policy scenario, petrochemicals, aviation, and trucking could keep global demand growing much longer. In other words, predicting how much oil humanity will want may prove almost as difficult as predicting how much oil humanity can produce. That creates an extraordinary possibility. The Stone Age did not end because humanity ran out of stones. The age of sailing ships did not end because the world ran out of wind. And the oil age may not end because Earth produces its final barrel. It may end because something better, cleaner, cheaper, or more convenient takes its place. Should we worry? Yes, but perhaps not about 2052. We should worry about energy security, volatile prices, geopolitical conflict, pollution, and the carbon released when petroleum is burned. And because petroleum is used not only for fuel, but also for plastics, chemicals, fertilizers, medicines, and countless other products. Moving beyond oil will not be simple. But we should not imagine a giant underground fuel gauge, slowly approaching empty, with 2052 printed beside the red line. Petroleum is finite, but its future cannot be reduced to a single countdown. New discoveries, better technology, changing prices, and changing demand continue to reshape what we call reserves. Someday the oil age will end, but our descendants may never witness Earth's last barrel being pumped. Instead, that barrel may remain where it has rested for millions of years in darkness beneath rock or ocean. Because by then, humanity may simply no longer need to bring it to the surface.
It's time to study new words in context. 1. Petroleum. Definition: a natural liquid found underground that is used to make gasoline, diesel, plastics, and many other products. It is also called crude oil. Example: petroleum has been an important source of energy for more than a century. 2. Finite. Definition: limited in amount, not endless. Example: petroleum is finite, so the world's supply cannot last forever. 3. Non-renewable. Definition: not able to be replaced naturally within a short period of time. Example: oil and coal are non-renewable energy resources. 4. Enormously. Definition: by a very large amount, greatly. Example: the world uses enormously more oil than nature can replace. 5. Exploration. Definition: the act of searching an area to find something, such as oil or gas. Example: oil exploration has led to new discoveries beneath the ocean. 6. Hovered. Definition: stayed near the same number, amount, or level for a period of time. Example: the estimated oil supply hovered around 50 years for many years. 7. Certainty. Definition: the state of being sure that something is true or will happen. Example: no one can predict the future of oil production with complete certainty. 8. On the moon. Definition: an expression used to describe something that seems extremely far away, or almost impossible to reach. Example: a century ago, oil beneath the deep ocean might as well have been on the moon. 9. Depletion. Definition: the process of using something until less and less of it remains. Example: scientists have studied the possible depletion of the world's oil supply. 10. Mature. Definition: to become older and reach a stage when production begins to slow or decrease. Example: as an oil field matures, it usually produces less oil. 11. Offset. Definition: to balance or make up for a loss or decrease. Example: new oil discoveries can offset declining production from older fields. 12. Hydrocarbon. Definition: a substance made of hydrogen and carbon. Oil and natural gas are mainly made of hydrocarbons. Example: petroleum contains many different hydrocarbons. 13. Hydraulic. Definition: using liquid under pressure to create force or do work. Example: hydraulic pressure can help break rock deep underground. 14. Fracking. Definition: a method of getting oil or gas from underground rock by using liquid under high pressure to crack the rock. Example: fracking made it possible to produce oil from rock that was once too difficult to use. 15. Pre-salt. Definition: rock and oil deposits found below a thick underground layer of salt. Example: Brazil has discovered large pre-salt oil fields beneath the Atlantic Ocean. 16. Subsalt. Definition: located or found below a layer of salt underground. Example: new technology has helped companies find subsalt oil deposits. 17. Seismic. Definition: related to vibrations or waves that travel through the ground. These waves can be used to study what lies underground. Example: Seismic technology helps scientists search for oil beneath the ocean floor. 18. Abiogenic. Definition: formed without coming from living things, or the remains of living things. Example: some scientists have studied whether small amounts of oil can form through abiogenic processes. 19. Petrochemical. Definition: a chemical made from petroleum or natural gas, often used to make plastics and other products. Example: many everyday plastic products are made from petrochemicals. 20. Aviation. Definition: the activity and business of flying airplanes. Example: aviation still depends heavily on fuel made from petroleum. 21. Level off. Definition: to stop rising or falling and stay at about the same level. Example: some experts expect global oil demand to level off in the coming years. 22. Volatile. Definition: likely to change quickly and unexpectedly, especially in price. Example: oil prices can be volatile during wars or political conflicts.
Comprehension questions. 1. Why is petroleum considered a non-renewable resource? Answer: petroleum takes millions of years to form, but humans use it much faster than nature can replace it. Therefore, it is considered non-renewable. 2. What does the year 2052 represent in the article? Answer: it is one estimate of when known oil reserves might be depleted, if certain assumptions about reserves and consumption are used. It is not an official expiration date for the world's petroleum. 3. Where did the 2052 estimate discussed in the article come from? Answer: it was cited in a 2019 article published by the Millennium Alliance for Humanity and the Biosphere MAHB at Stanford University. 4. Why should we not think of 2052 as the exact year when the world will run out of oil? Answer: oil reserves, production, technology, prices, discoveries, and demand can all change. Because these factors are uncertain, no one can know the exact year when recoverable oil will run out. 5. What are proved reserves? Answer: proved reserves are known amounts of oil that can be recovered with reasonable certainty under present economic and operating conditions. 6. How can the world's proved oil reserves increase even while people continue using oil? Answer: new oil fields can be discovered, better technology can make difficult oil easier to recover, and changes in prices and costs can make previously uneconomic oil worth producing. 7. What did M. King Herbert predict about U.S. oil production? Answer: Herbert predicted that conventional U.S. oil production would reach a peak between 1965 and 1970 and then decline. U.S. production did reach a major peak around 1970. 8. Did the shale revolution prove that Herbert's idea of oil depletion was wrong? Why or why not? Answer: no. Oil fields still mature and decline. The shale revolution opened new resources and changed how much oil could be produced. So it postponed and reshaped earlier peak oil forecasts, rather than disproving depletion. 9. How did horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing change oil production? Answer: they allowed companies to reach oil and gas trapped in tight rock formations that had previously been too difficult or expensive to produce. 10. What do the oil discoveries in Brazil and Guyana teach us about petroleum reserves? Answer: they show that new discoveries and improved technology can add large amounts of recoverable oil to known reserves, even in places that were previously difficult to explore. 11. Does the article claim that petroleum is infinite? Explain. Answer: no. Petroleum is finite and forms far too slowly to replace the amount humans consume. The article argues only that we cannot easily predict when economically recoverable oil will become scarce. 12. What is the difference between peak oil and running out of oil? Answer: peak oil is the point when oil production reaches its highest level and then begins to decline. Running out of oil would mean that usable oil is essentially gone. The two ideas are not the same. 13. Why might global oil demand level off or decline in the future? Answer: Electric vehicles, renewable energy, greater energy efficiency, climate policies, and changes in transportation could reduce the world's need for petroleum. 14. Why are future oil demand predictions also uncertain? Answer. They depend on many changing factors, including electric vehicle use, government policies, economic growth, aviation, developing countries' energy needs, and demand for petrochemicals. 15. What is the main message of the article's conclusion? Answer. Petroleum is finite, but we should not imagine a simple countdown to a particular year, when all the oil will suddenly disappear. The oil age may end before the world's last barrel is pumped, because society may eventually find better ways to meet its energy and material needs.